Hey guys, I'm Dov, and today I'm back with more Total War Warhammer 2 online action. We're continuing our Lore of Magic guide today with the Lore of Metal, hence Big Bird, who, as you guys may or may not know, is one of my favorite legendary lords in the game. He is a Lore of Metal caster, and today he's just brought Final Transmutation. This is indeed Game 3 between Shetland Apache and Hyala Nala, so we're going to be taking a look at that. Whoever wins this wins the series, of course, and Hyala Nala has taken Chaos versus Shetland Apache's Beastmen, so we're definitely in for a wild fight. Yeah, Big Bird here with Lore Metal has only Final Transmutation, so we can talk about that. We'll talk about the other spells after the battle. Final Transmutation is probably the most popular spell for Lore of Metal right now. It, depending on the patch, has been either complete garbage, wildly overpowered, and rarely somewhere in between. Although in the current patch, I would say it's reasonably not overpowered. Seems to be powerful, but not too overpowered. But what it is a massive area, 30-meter radius, direct damage spell. Scales better against single model entities, so like characters or, you know, single model monsters or so on. It's going to be better against them, but because it's an area of effect, it'll hit anything around them, and it does still do a decent amount of damage to high model count units, particularly if they're very tattered, because the way the scaling works, you know, if you cast it on, for example, a unit of very tattered infantry with only a handful of unit models remaining, it will pretty much finish them off. So a very powerful spell in that respect. And that is the only magic for the Warriors of Chaos here. We've also got 3 Chaos Warriors with great weapons, a Shaggoth, 1 unit of Aspiring Champions. Front line is 4 Chaos Marauders. We've got 4 Marauder Horsemasters with 2 Chaos Poison Warhounds. And that's it for Chaos. In terms of the Beastmen here, Malagor the Dark Omen is going to be the Lord here, backed up by a Bray Shaman. So let's go ahead and take a look here. Malagor just has Traderkin, very interesting, whereas the Bray Shaman has both Spirit Leech and Fate of Bunus, so I guess mostly just bringing Malagor because he has Arcane Conduit to try and get additional Winds of Magic and to potentially use that Traderkin. Very interesting. I would have thought you would have brought him just for the Cygor summon, but oh well. We've also got 2 units of Bestigor here in the center, 1, 2, 3 units of Ungor Spearman Herd, a whole mess of Centigors here, 1, 2 Centigors with Throwing Axes. Make that 3. We've got Minotaurs with great weapons, Poison Warhounds, 2 of them, 2 Ungor Raiders up front, and that's pretty much it. So let's go ahead and kick the battle into full gear. Oh, of course, this Cygor here as well. So, yeah, Lore of Metal is one of those lores that's a little bit, some people might call it underwhelming. I do think it has some pretty decent tools. Like I said, depending on the patch, you know, the damage for Final Transmutation has kind of been all over the place. So if you're watching this, you know, after the current patch, which is the, I believe the Tomb King's hotfix patch, yeah, your mileage may vary with that spell, but in the current patch, it's pretty solid and definitely a good pick in a lot of different situations. You can see these Ungor Raiders here are going to get charged by Marauder Horsemasters. Marauder Horsemasters do have better combat stats and more armor than your typical Marauder Horsemen, so they'll be able to do quite a bit of damage here. You can see these Ungor Raiders are losing decisively. That being said, the Marauder Horsemasters pulling away. They definitely don't want to take that engagement against the Ungor Spearman Herd. Meanwhile, though, these Hounds are going to get in and do some really nice work against these Ungor Raiders as well, getting us a really nice charge here, getting in there with those Poison Claws and more. Basically, Big Bird's just going to have to advance and try and get a really nice pocket for his Final Transmutation. These Warriors of Chaos, though, are taking an absolute beating from that Cygor at the moment. Over here, you can see the Chaos Poison Warhounds definitely got the worst of this engagement, but the Marauder Horsemasters still hanging around, still pitching their javelins. Over here, Hyala Nala is doing a very good job kind of trying to isolate different units and use the mobility advantage here. Typically, you would think that the Beastmen would have the mobility advantage, but because all the Centigors are kind of up here on this hill, not wanting to get too close as they are a pretty high-value unit, the Marauder Horsemasters are able to come in and do quite a bit of work, clean up a few of these Ungor Raiders here. Really nice job so far. You can see Ungor Raider here being isolated, probably going to get an Alpha Strike either from the Shaggoth or from Big Bird and then quickly get terrified away. You can see Spirit Leech going down on the Shaggoth there. But Big Bird actually, you know, he may seem like an odd pick against the Beastman, but I actually kind of like it a little bit, just because, you know, he has that missile resistance, so the throwing axes, of which can be a huge danger from the Beastman. The Centaurs, the throwing axes won't do much to him. He also has the Fear and Terror and the Final Transmutation, and because the Beastmen don't typically have a lot of, and here comes the Final Transmutation, so it's getting in here against all these low model count units. You can see Malagor the Dark Omen and the Brave Shaman Lord of Death are both going to be hit by it here, so just watch as their hit points just get torn away here. It's doing a massive amount of damage, and even to these Bestigor Herd and the Hounds in the front line too, doing quite a bit of damage here in conjunction with the infantry. It's going to allow these guys to hopefully push through here. You can see terror right now is so far not an issue, but it is starting to become an issue for certain units. Over here, these Ungor Spearman Herd isolated is a perfect engagement for these Marauders here, these Chaos Marauders. Just pushing through very aggressively. Obviously, it's going to be a wild battle here. You can see Shaggoth has gotten onto the Cygor here. This is a really bad situation for the Cygor, but the throwing axes are trying to support here, pitching in their little tomahawks from the side, doing quite a bit of damage to the Shaggoth. Big Bird's having to pull away there so that he doesn't get inundated by these Minotaurs with Great Weapons, who are a big danger. But here comes a really timely rear charge here from these Marauder Horsemasters, hopefully going to be finishing off the leadership of a lot of the units in this pocket. Well, they probably want to pull away now, though, and start pitching those Javelins at these Minotaurs, so they are a very high-value target. Don't have a lot of armor, so they are going to be pretty vulnerable to that Javelin fire there. You can see Big Bird is still in here cleaning things up, though. He doesn't have Arcane Conduit, unfortunately, so it's going to be tough for him to get off another Overcast Final Transmutation, but that one was enough to do quite a bit of damage to the Brave Shaman and Malagor. Unfortunately, they're both still on the field at the moment, but you can see Big Bird rushing around, using his terror bombing to try and take off a lot of the Beastman support units. And then without the support, a lot of these low model count units are going to start to fall apart against just all of these Chaos Infantry here. You can see the Minotaurs with Great Weapons trying to come through, but here comes another Final Transmutation. No, Traitorkin here, so doing quite a bit of damage to the Chaos Forces. Really nice use of that ability. You can see it's enough to actually send some of these Marauder Horsemasters into the Terror Zone, where they get terrified away by that Cygor, but the Brave Shaman here of Death is going to get inundated by Sarthrael. It's still a very close battle at this point. There's a lot of Centaurs with throwing axes here. The question is whether or not they're going to have time to be able to actually use their throwing axes, or if they're just going to get crumbled. Bestigor here, unfortunately, getting overwhelmed by just pure numbers of Chaos Marauders and Marauder Horsemasters. Malagor's going to try and come support in that engagement, but you can see Big Bird's gotten into the back line, and because of his heavy missile resistance, he won't take as much damage from these the Centaur missiles. So yeah, at this point, the balance power is starting to turn more and more decisively in the favor of the forces of Chaos, as the Minotaurs are routed off so close to the edge of the map here. They're probably just going to go straight off here. Same with the Bestigor and some of these other units. There's pretty much just the Centaurs left. Malagor is unfortunately being inundated by all sorts of horrifying monstrosities, so I'm not even sure where he ended up here. He's in there somewhere. Oh, there you are, Malagor. You having a good day, buddy? I don't think so, but yeah, at that he's going to shatter, and it will be a victory for the Warriors of Chaos. So Hyalanala takes the series. Well played to both players. Thanks a lot for allowing me to showcase your guys' series. It's been a lot of fun being involved with the league, and I'm going to continue bringing you guys streams and replays from the league. So yeah, I figured, you know, since these league replays are really good and they also show off the lores of Magic that I want to look at, it would be worth taking a look at. In terms of the army breakdown here, 67 kills on Sarthrael is very solid. Nice final transmutations there, particularly in the late game. The Marauder Horsemasters did very well for themselves. Of course, the Shaggoth needs no introduction. For Shell and Apache here, bright spots, definitely the Cygor did very well for themselves. Minotaurs underperformed a little bit, as did the Centaurs with throwing axes, and the front line just kind of got monster matched a little bit there, so that was pretty rough at the end of the day. Yeah, let's go ahead and just take a look briefly at the lore of metal here. So currently, only the Empire and Chaos have access to the lore of metal. So if we go to the custom battle screen here, Norska, when they get added, if I remember correctly, did have access to the lore of metal as well. But currently, it's only the Warriors of Chaos with a variety of sorcerers, or the Empire, of course, with ye old Balthazar Gelt himself. And for Chaos, you can take Big Bird. You can also take just a regular Sorcerer Lord lore of metal, who can, you know, ride a dragon and all that, or just a generic Chaos Sorcerer lore of metal. But in terms of the spells that we didn't get to see, Searing Doom is a bombardment, good against low armor targets. You know, clumped up groups of infantry or skirmishers. particularly against a faction like, you know, Wood Elves, Skaven, someone else like that who's going to have low armor across the board. Will be very useful against them. Plague of Rust is another really nice niche ability. It's incredibly cheap at only 4 Winds of Magic or 6 for an Overcast, which is just stupidly cheap. It's only a single target, but minus 60 armor can be very powerful, particularly, for example, if you're having Big Bird duel another Lord. Big Bird has okay combat stats, 60 melee attack, 40 defense is pretty solid. Doesn't have the best AP values, though, so if you can use this Plague of Rust to tear away, like if he's 1v1ing against, you know, a Boris Todbringer, for example. If you use this Plague of Rust to tear the armor off of Boris Todbringer, Sarthrel is going to be able to do a lot more damage to him. Likewise, I have seen strategies, not in the current meta, but in patches past, you'd have strategies where you would take like Balthazar Gelt with Plague of Rust and then Alpha Strike them with maybe a couple of Empire Captains or other very high damage units. Very useful spell overall, and one of my favorite spells from the Lore of Metal. Gehenna's Golden Hounds is kind of a mid-tier vortex. The issue with mid-tier vortexes is the random element makes them a little bit unpredictable, and they either are cost-effective or aren't. Gehenna's Golden Hounds I would need to test again. It's good against low armor targets, but I haven't tested it against armored targets. But against low armor targets, just based on some campaign gameplay and others, it seems fairly decent, but not the best vortex in the world. Transmutation of Lead is another pretty nice one. It's a huge area of effect. It lasts a pretty decent amount of time. It is a minus 26 melee attack and 25% weapon damage. Pretty serious debuff at the end of the day. It is a little bit expensive at 11 Winds of Magic, but that massive area of effect means you can pretty much debuff your entire opponent's front line with it. So a very, very powerful spell in that aspect. And of course, Final Transmutation we got to see in the battle. In terms of the lore attribute for Lore of Metal, it is a metal shifting, which in the current iteration gives plus 10% weapon damage and plus 10% armor piercing to all units map-wide every time you cast a spell. So you can get some pretty good value out of this, particularly if you have like Plague of Rust and Searing Doom, for example, and you're continuously spamming those cheap spells. That's going to give you a nice little weapon damage boost every time you cast a spell, which, for example, if you pair that with Plague of Rust, that little bit of extra weapon damage helps because they have lowered armor and so on, so can be very synergistic in that respect, but typically you'll just see it with the Final Transmutation. A lot of these other spells aren't wildly useful. The other area of effect damage spells are okay, but they aren't great against armor. Plague of Rest is one that I would take in a lot of different situations, but the others are sometimes cost-effective, not exactly. A Glittering Robe is one I seem to have skipped over. It's plus 30 armor and plus 8 leadership. It's kind of meh, to be honest. If you overcast it, it gives it an area of effect, but not the best in the world. Again, with low armor infantry, depending on kind of where they're at, like you can make stake troops go from 30 to 60, but there are other units I think that give you other better buffs than just minus 8 leadership. Again, it is a cheap spell, only 6 Winds of Magic, so if you're really looking to maximize on that metal shifting uptime, you might want to take Glittering Robe and something like this loadout, where you just take Searing Doom, Plague of Rust, and Glittering Robe. Honestly, though, not the best spell at the end of the day. Really, for me, the highlight spells, Searing Doom can be good situationally, as can Gehenna's Hounds, but Plague of Rust, Final Transmutation, and sometimes Transmutation of Lead as well, I think are your bread and butter spells for the Lore of Metal. So hopefully you guys enjoyed watching this breakdown. If you like this kind of content, be sure to like and subscribe and hit that bell notification button so you're notified every time I upload a new video. I'm having a ton of fun with this Lore Magic guide, so we're going to keep it rolling with some of the race-specific lores next. I've got Lore of Ruin on deck, and we're going to be moving on afterwards to some of the other race-specific lores I have yet to cover. So stay tuned for that, and we'll see you next time.